So the first question is a general question. So I invite everybody to participate. How many constellations do you think can coexist? And there are two aspects to this. There's the technical issue, the self-generating, the intrasystem interference. And there's also the commercial aspect. Is the cake big enough for everybody? Who wants to start first?
I'm happy to go first, Hector. So listen, I think the answer to is the cake big enough for everyone question. I mean, I covered that off on my first slide. So just the telco business alone and cloud business is going to be worth around about $5.8 trillion by 2025. And we have, the satellite, and I'm talking about I'm talking about all of us on the panel and all the other satellite operators out there, only has around about 1% of share of wallet of that number today. So I think there's a huge opportunity for our business, especially as we become much closer aligned with telco standards. And we've heard that from a number of the presenters on the panel today, that their respective systems, including our mPOWER system, is going to be a lot more compatible than the old sort of traditional GEO satellite. So I think very much so. It's going to be enough business out there for all of us to be happy.
Anybody else wants to add anything?
Yeah, I think, as I said earlier, I think we also have to look at which parts of the market we're focusing on. And Hector, your initial presentation really did some good comparisons there between GEO, MEO, and LEO. They have advantages and disadvantages, and I think we're not all targeting the same part of the network. It's always nice to hear what Iridium has to say, and they're very much targeting different parts of different use cases across the spectrum of enterprise and telco services. So I think I don't think we knock into each other that often, because there's a broad market there, and I think we can very much, and it's a growing market, and we can all play in that market.
Yeah, I think just to add, from the commercial side, I think you're exactly right. There's different business models, broadband, IoT, Earth imaging, etc. So I think as long as there's not too many trying to share the same market, then we're okay. But, maybe as a throwaway, it's two per market, two per model.
So to try and be a bit provocative, Simon said that at the moment, satellites are only tapping 1%. And that is a known figure that's been around for quite a long time. Yeah. What has changed now? Why all of a sudden it's going to be so much competitive that we're going to be 20%?
I can take a stab at that. I support Simon there, coming from the telco world. I think if we flip it around, and David did an excellent job of showing how we need to solve from a customer's perspective. It's not so much about the cool technology that we can collectively launch. One is if the use of the satellite network doesn't involve any complexity, additional hardware, additional terminals. You need accelerators because you have high latency. Once you simplify, become as a Lego model that David mentioned, then people will adapt it more. I think that's very important. Second, I think the economics are getting better. All of us are trying our best to stretch that horizon even better, both economics of the capacity, but also economics of the terminals. A number of people have mentioned smaller terminals, lower cost terminals. So that again improves the business case for customers to use us. So I think at least those two factors will make it easier and make it more economical, will drive us more.
Just another comment for me on that. I think it's economics across everywhere. It's how we're building satellites. I mean, it's just a major improvements in how satellites can be made in short term and very, the time scale to build a satellite. I mean, the OneWeb satellite factory building 2 satellites a day. It was unheard of 10 years ago. I mean, Iridium did some clever stuff there with their first satellite build, as we know, not using even non-space qualified components in some cases, and the satellite still lasted 20 years. So there's been a lot of change there on the manufacturing of the satellites, and so we could evolve quicker and meet the needs of the market. But it's also the use of RF components and piggybacking on other uses in the same frequency bands. Just the cost of RF amplified devices has come way down because there's a broader market for them and there's more mass production.
I think the other point is that 1% of a growing market is still a very attractive proposition to a number of operators. And whatever we do, it's still got to be competitive with the mobile operator end user prices. It's not quite a race to the bottom, but there is certainly a downward trend on prices generally. But I think we've got a good future as a complement to other means of connecting A to B.
Okay, so I think everybody had a say. I think we can pass to the next question, which is on the terminus side. Terminus have been a barrier to many services. When I was first involved in satellites, they were quite expensive with VSATs. Then HTS came along and the price dropped almost by an order of magnitude. But they're still considered to be quite expensive. Could perhaps each operator, each system can tell us something about what they intend to do to make terminals more accessible, technically and economically?
I can answer that first. Technically, I think it's not easy to come up with a very cost-effective terminal, I think. So there should be some kind of cost reduction techniques related with the service providers. On the other hand, for example, in Turkey, that will be the main challenge for the MEO and LEO service providers, because it's not easy for Turkey to afford these type of prices in Turkey. So in both terms, for both functionality and in terms of price, they should be cost effective.
Phased arrays have been sort of, everybody seems to be talking about phased arrays, but traditionally phased arrays have been an expensive, elegant solution. Very elegant, but expensive. Is there anything magic? Is it a question of quantities that could help?
I'll make a few comments there. I think if you look at the things that make phased arrays challenging, one of them is some of just the laws of physics, things like scan loss. If you have to have a broad scan, you end up with more loss. So you don't always have that bore sight performance for your phased array. But again, so if you look at how you're using that phased array in a LEO constellation where your scan angles are much less than for example, a MEO, so there you have it. The phased array becomes more attractive because you could get more performance for the same aperture size. So that helps the economics. But scale is definitely very important, I think, in phased array. It's you're looking at the devices that make up that phased array and how you can scale it, and then it's looking at clever manufacturing techniques and adoption of other technology into that manufacturing environment, so that you can again bring the costs down and have it things like 3D printing and various different things that are in material science that are improving, whether it's for phased arrays with lenses or with other, or even the radome cover, how you make those at an affordable price. So I think there's a lot that's happening there, which all adds up to a more affordable design.
I think if you look at the way phased array technology has developed over the last 30 years, we've come on leaps and bounds in many, many areas, but we've got a long way to go. But the goal is where you get to a point where you can just print off array antennas like a roll of wallpaper and get down to that sort of level of costing. But we've still got a long way to go. If you could have a flexible antenna that you could just stick on the side of a car or an aircraft or whatever, and it automatically configures itself, that would be absolutely brilliant. But I don't see it within the next 5 years. And so in the interim time, we've got to figure out how to make existing antenna designs cheap, reliable, and a cost-effective solution. So if you look at the average mechanically steered VSAT, for example, for the last 10, 15 years, they've been put together from a range of discrete components, which individually are not particularly cheap, but there's the labor cost of assembling it all. And that's just not the way to go. You've got to look at a much more integrated solution. You've got to integrate the modem technology into chipsets, integrate it with an RF component, and yet still get down to a very, very competitive price in a production environment. But there are things that can be done. You know, there are lots of areas that we've examined in the last couple of years on, you know, why have we done it this way in the past? What can we do in the future? What other parallel technologies can we take and incorporate into a user terminal? And we believe that a sort of £300-400 price tag is actually achievable, albeit in volume production quantities. And by the time we've done that, then hopefully the phased array solutions will have matured a little bit more and the two will converge.
I think for Iridium, smaller and lower cost, you know, means lower throughput. But we're rolling that out now with our Certus 100 products. And for us, you know, we think that's a sweet spot. We're staying in our lane, and we think there's going to be some good demand for that. So, yeah, we're not straying into the broad, trying to get maximum throughput out of a device. You know, we think there's a demand here for this lower levels.
So, for example, Harvey, in the, I think it was the Certus broadband, what sort of technology are you using?
For the antennas on the broadband of phased array.
Okay.
I can just complement, I think, what Mike said. Given our enterprise market focus, we further look at from a specific market perspective, and we're taking the approach that Mike mentioned about catalyzing the ecosystem through integrated terminals. So aviation market, I think there is ThinCom, which is a very good solution today, and we are working with partners to create electronically steered antennas there as well. On the maritime market, we see the current dual parabolic antenna-based terminals as a good path. And even from a cost perspective, a full integrated terminal being as much or cheaper than a single VSAT today. So we're working with partners to get there as well. On the terrestrial side, over and above dual parabolic systems, I think most of the discussion here relates to, from a terrestrial market, how do you get it down? But we think it will get down to a fair price point to compete from a enterprise backhaul perspective within the next 3-4 years for sure. So for example, we announced last week that we've chosen Satixfy to work on a modem chipset / core module. That's our way of catalyzing the ecosystem. It's not that people cannot use their own chipsets, but this way we are at least creating a solution, a path to get to that low cost, affordable integrated terminal.
Incidentally, I've recently received an offer from Starlink to purchase a terminal for $99.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what technology that is, to be honest.
The Starlink terminals are interesting, but I think your offer price of $99 is way different from their production costs at the moment. But who knows in future?
Okay, let's move to another question. If we divide the non-geostationary world into the old guys and the new guys, I'm not too sure where to put O2B, to be honest, Simon. It seems to be somewhere in between, but you can position yourself where you want. How do the new guys see the old guys, and how do the old guys see the new guys? Is it they're coming into my patch, or is it the more the merrier?
Well, I think from Iridium's perspective, I mean, our CAO likes to say that LEO is a neighborhood, not a business model. And there are lots of different types of businesses in a neighborhood. So I think from our perspective, we view many as potential new partners. In fact, I think it's publicly known that we have an MOU with OneWeb. And, you know, we're looking for partnering where we're already doing it with our broadband services, where, you know, we're complementing VSAT services by acting as the fallback in the event of coverage issues or failure. So I think some competition, but also more opportunities.
I think from a company like SES, could be considered old guys and new guys, you know, from our perspective, I mean, we've kind of talked about this today in terms of, you know, as the general market and business scale, as we get more and more users out there using our technology, all of the costs are going to come down, you know, from the terminal side to every single sort of element of the ecosystem. So for us, we kind of welcome it very much so. I mean, I think there's one of the points that Dave made earlier on, that just the different companies on this panel today, we're not really treading on each other's toes too much, because, you know, we serve certain parts of the market which perhaps the other ones don't. So I think, you know, there's very much opportunity for all of us there. And I think as we start to scale this, and also when you include some of those consumer products like the Starlink and Kuiper, when they start sort of coming to the market as well, it's just going to bring the cost down for everything, which I think is going to be, you know, it's going to see the whole business scale.
I could have a personal opinion on it. I could say I used to work for one of the old guys. Now I'm working for one of the new guys, but I won't. but no, I think that all the different systems are evolving. Yeah, I mean, although OneWeb is busy, getting ready to start our commercial service of our Gen 1, we're already working on Gen 2 and Gen 3. I mean, there's always the future and looking at and you use your current system to often test the future, and we're even doing tests on the current system, which will working with the UK government and Satellite Catapult, for example, looking at positioning, timing, and navigation capabilities for the future. So I think we all have a long roadmap, and that's what we so old and new is probably not that applicable, really.
Sorry, I lost my earpiece. Interestingly, there's a question from the public which says, do you think years down the line there will be a scope of business like OneWeb, Blue Origin, SpaceX might share their Satcom infrastructure to collectively provide broadband services similar to what BT does with competitors like 3, O2, etc.? So I think, I can't remember, I think it was Harvey who mentioned that there's collaboration with OneWeb.
That's right. I think from our network's perspective, that's probably less likely compared to some of the new guys. As I said, I think we're looking to stay in our lane. We know our business model, and I think that's probably where we'll stay, other than, as I say, complementing some of those networks.
Talking of competition, there's competition between you lot, so to speak, but there's also competition from China and other regions. What do you think?
Competition is never going to go away. I mean, if China decides it's going to do something, it's going to do something, and we have to find a way of living with it, and maybe there's more cooperation potential.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, you could say if there's a competitive environment, it makes people do things better. You don't get complacent. You're always looking at distinguishing yourself and having a value proposition which is better for your customers, and it it may be technology driven, it may be how you work with your customers. Are you a good, and it's those partnerships you build as well as just the technology. So I think in a competitive environment, you have to be nimble, you have to be agile, and you have to move to the future.
I think anybody who fears competition shouldn't be in this game, really. And that applies across industry as a whole.
I like that. Yeah, you're right.
That's good.
That's good. I think it's the right attitude. Another question. With lower space getting increasingly crowded, what actions are being taken for debris mitigation, light pollution, interference mitigation, etc.?
And include the radio astronomers in that one. Their small signals are being attenuated or scattered. So radio astronomers, please hear us.
I can start with that. I think, as I mentioned in my intro presentation also, firstly, we've chosen an orbit which is much further away. So that helps to some extent. But even from the systems that are regarding the maneuverability of the satellite on board the satellite, or anything related to end of life management of the satellite, we've made sure that all those systems have multiple levels of resilience built in, so that we can make sure that they can safely deorbit at the end of the period. I think that's our approach of doing it, and having been doing it for some time, is we have never done it in LEO, but having been doing it for many years in space, we are trying to import all the best practices we've learned from our existing business as well.
Yeah, I would say OneWeb is very much doing the same there. We're very much focused on responsible space, and it's really those three areas. It's responsible deployment, what you test on the satellites and how you launch them, and it's responsible operation in space. What thrusting system you use, how agile you can be, the active management for conjunction avoidance of your management systems. Everything's predictable. And then it's how you responsibly dispose of the satellites, whether you're in LEO orbit, whether how you deorbit them, how you put them in a safe mode before you do that. If you only have electronic thrusters and no fuel on board, that's a nice starting point. And if you can, in the future, if things do go wrong, if you can have a grappling hook, as we call it, that our satellites have, which has been designed for the future, the in-orbit refuge collectors can move your satellites out of the way, and that is a business that people are working on for the future. So.
Oh, boy.
Yes,
oh my goodness.
I think from Iridium's perspective, it's not an area of expertise for me, but I think we've done our bit with our original constellation. I think the guidelines say we've got a 25-year disposal window, but I think we averaged deorbiting them in 90 days. So all of ours have been deorbited.
I think most of the sort of satellite operators certainly accept their kind of responsibility when it comes to keeping enough fuel on board the satellites at the end of life so they can deorbit them and they break up in the Earth's atmosphere as they come down. I'm also sort of very much encouraged by some of these new companies. In fact, I read about one for the first time just last week in the UK press, a company called Astroscale, which is a British company, but a bit like what Dave just said, is going to go around harpooning satellites, ones which are stuck up in orbit, haven't had enough fuel to deorbit them. And I think, very excited about that kind of technology sort of scaling out in the future to clean up all orbits, whether it's GEO, MEO or LEO.
Okay. So the next question is specifically to Simon and Manik, because you're in a privileged position that you have your foot in both camps. Simon with SES is both a geo and a MEO operator, and Manik will be in a similar situation with geo and LEO. How do you see the market share, or rather the split of revenues between the two systems in, say, 5-10 years when both markets are mature?
Maybe I can sort of take a stab at that one first. So, you know, from an SES perspective today, we still have a higher proportion of our overall revenue is attached to our video business. This, you know, is a market which isn't growing. Luckily, it's not shrinking too fast either. But for us in particular, it's definitely the SES network side of the business, which is growing faster with sort of double-digit growth over the last few years. And it's forecast to sort of take over the video side in terms of revenues sometime in the next 3 years. So we're very much sort of gearing for the future, and most of the investments that we're making now are in the network side of the business, and very much also investing in the NGSO constellation as well, in mPOWER, because we very much see that as being kind of the future in terms of our data networks that we're providing our customers. So yeah, that's, and actually the mPOWER constellation is very similar to the O3B. So we can scale it as and when we get the demand. So the O3B constellation started with 6 satellites, now it's up to 20. The initial constellation on O3B is going to be 11, and again, we can kind of scale that out as and when we see demand. So that's very much the future for our business.
So from Telesat's side, it goes back to what is the use case. So from a broadcast perspective, definitely that will remain on geo satellites. We don't intend to serve that with Lightspeed, our LEO network. But from enterprise and data services or two-way services, eventually it'll all be on LEO, on Lightspeed. We are not integrating our geo satellites with our LEO satellites for data services. I don't have an exact window of how it'll transition to that. It's going to take 5 years or more? I don't know. But if we goes back to all the key capabilities that the market is demanding, low latency, high capacity, the full global service. And we truly believe that it can only be served via LEO network. So eventually it will be all data services will be on LEO.
Okay. So the next question is about regulatory and regional landing rights and things like this. With a global system, you need to ensure that you can operate globally if you want to have revenues from all possible areas. It's not a small challenge. Could you tell us a bit how you're addressing it?
Yeah, I can start. Again, I think this is where old space trumps new space, I suppose. We like SES or other existing players, we've been doing this for a lot of time. We've been operating and getting landing rights, market access, and so forth, pretty much all over the world today. Yes, the playbook will be different for NGSOs. Different rules will apply, but more or less the way about going about it is kind of still in a highly regulated, process-driven manner. So we've going about it in a fairly correct way. There's already, for example, Europe has made sure that NGSO standards for Ka band, we're interested in Ka band. They've made it free circulation of terminals, blanket licensing. So that's a good path, a good way they're setting the process ahead. And we are working through the process in all the other countries, as you would expect any business plan to do. Start with your key markets and then go towards the smaller markets.
Yeah, talking about OneWeb, very, very similar. I mean, we're not Old Space, but we hired people from Old Space to do the same work. So we have a very capable, team who's been working on market access, but we're also, as I said earlier, we're not doing stuff ourselves. We have local partners in these countries. We're not going to be an internet service provider in a country. That's our customer doing that, the distribution partner, and they already have their their licenses in place, and we just help them with the elements that are new for them. So I think, and as an industry, I think we've done a lot of good work there in terms of terminal certification and blanket licensing, which either in KU band or KA band, which has made it a lot easier for everybody. And it's, so I think it's all about, your partnerships and some of the operators, who aren't on this panel, who think they can just bypass everything and do it all themselves. I think you're going to have a bit of a wake-up call soon.
I think David is absolutely right there. The partnerships are absolutely key to a success on any of these things. Where we've got agreements in place, it's always been done via the local partnerships with operators and with the regulators. There is no other way around it if you want success.
And I think one of the other important things is that we all have to team up together and act as one big common voice, especially when they have the ITU meetings every 3 or 4 years in Geneva. I mean, one thing that I've seen over the last few years, and I can see happening more in the future, is the spectrum grab from the terrestrial players. Already seen it quite a lot on C-band. I know that isn't really relevant to the discussion today, but I only heard this week, actually, there's quite a few countries now in Asia that are going to be using Ka frequencies for 5G. Singapore being one of them, and I think there's a few others as well. So that's something that we all also need to be mindful of, and it's important that we all sort of get together and with a common voice to try to avoid too much of this spectrum being taken away from us.
Yes, okay. They're also threatening the KU band as well.
Yeah,
future mobile.
That's right.
And especially the upper frequencies, where today they're not used, but they're being asked for 5G, like QV and W, etc., etc. My last question would be, well, with all these non-geostationary systems, for me, the soft spot is mobility. And mobility, the two big businesses that I can see is IFC, aeronautical, and maritime. How big a chunk do you think that these systems would be grabbing? What would be the percentage of the revenues of each one of you that you would expect to be from these two areas for mobility?
Given the number of cruise liners parked up around the world at the moment, that would be an interesting one.
I think it depends on the geographical area. I mean, I think, if you look at, the people who are offering a full global coverage, it's to have a successful business model, you have to have different, focus on all those markets, I think, and they will, and they will have different demands in different coverage areas, and in some cases, at different times of the year or day. I mean, the cruise business is a seasonal business, and so you have to look at what you do, when they're in the off season. So I think there's some interesting business models there. Again, it's all about partnerships, at how you sell those services into those markets, so that that you maximize the use of your resources in a good way.
Just to make a comment from my side, from SCS side. So actually, it was pointed out by Mike earlier that O3B was originally designed from Greg Weiler back in the day when he came up with the concept of the company to serve the other 3 billion, but it's evolved quite a bit from then. And I think, you know, that's one of the great things about satellite technology, whereas a lot of technology on the ground is kind of made redundant after 3 or 4 years. In the satellite, you can kind of evolve, it's evolved very much in terms of the use for those satellite systems. And for us, in particular, one of our most successful verticals to date on O3B, and I'm sure it will continue to be with mPOWER in the future, has been the cruise business, because O3B really is a kind of a unique opportunity for those cruise lines to offer, in some cases, up to 1.5 gigabits per cruise ship with low latency services. So yeah, I think mobility is very much an important part of what we're doing today, and it will continue to be more important when mPOWER comes along, where we can use mPOWER into planes and ISR missions and smaller scale boats like super yachts and even commercial tankers as well.
And I think from Iridium perspective, obviously our business model is based on mobility. You know, we started with portable handhelds and we're moving towards portable data devices. So it's a huge proportion of our business in the past and still moving forward.
I think there's also unexplored markets which we need to keep an eye on. I mean, you mentioned tankers a few moments ago, and as tankers become more and more autonomous with just, you know, 1 or 2 as a crew on there, with everything linked back to some control center, then, you know, this is an area that will become more prevalent in years to come.
So I think, Barry, we could close there. I'd like to thank all the panel members for your presentations and your interactivity. Thanks very much. And I'll pass the floor to Barry, the Master of Ceremonies.
Okay, thank you very much then, Hector. You've all done really well. So we conclude a very good, exciting second session. This 5-year Satcom vision concerning LEO MEO satellite aspects. Firstly, to our audience, trust you have enjoyed your time here. The time spent is beneficial and you've learned something more about our business. Next, thanks to our hardworking presenters and moderator, Hakan at Profin, Hector in Paris, Harvey at Iridium, Manik in Telesat, Simon at O3B mPOWER, Mike at Methera, and David at OneWeb. And our moderator, Hector Fenech, for all of their valued and excellent presentations. They've been clear and concise, and that's what I like. Next, my thanks goes to the organisation. That's Profin Group for initiation and support of this Satcom Vision conference. And to Daphne, Leo and Sadettin back at the ranch in Ankara. So the highlights. In summary, I think there are many, indicating that there is long life, like a Guinness beer, in Arthur C. Clarke's original 1945 publication, which postulated the geostationary arc. That moment of Satcom was born. This was an epoch for the dawn of a modern world. But along with this came potential LEO and MEO missions, our subject today. Overall, one reports GEO is healthy and remains increasingly so. Also, overall, LEO MEO, some as functioning constellations, are sustainable, becoming more competitive, and thanks to application of modern technical implementations and understandings. System and network investment is high attracted by internet broadband and 4 and 5G applications. What we have shown you is a LEO MEO future roadmap from 5 global major space segment providers, most offering global coverage. All have impressive pieces of engineering ready to serve the telecom market. Indeed, in future, all networks are predicted to become more efficient, more competitive, satisfying an increasing demand to supply new capacity. Of course, my overall school report here is positive. GEO, HTS and VHTS applications are predicted to be a great success, whilst the financial investment to fund LEO MEO constellations offerings to commercial and government customers alike are forthcoming and some are awaited. FinTech and Big Tech provides massive growth, says Jamie Diamond, and maybe a lot of people know him. He's the CEO of JP Morgan and he appears on Bloomberg TV quite often. No doubt 5G will drive demand. We shall experience increased broadband speeds. Aero, IFC, in fruition, will come alive once COVID abates. Cruise liners will reappear. Do you know what? Not 10 miles away from here, I've got 7 cruise ships moored off Ringstead Bay. No worries. Satellite backhaul, 4G, 5G, advantageously via HTS, VHTS transmissions, the latter with QV band. Growth of enterprise and large corporations continues. Increased capacity for secure government and defence applications. AI, artificial intelligence and robotics advance, and analytic applications prosper within a low latency domain. Market forecasts. So from 2021 to 28, everything seems and appears to look very healthy. So 10, 12, 14% increases, except for maritime, which is only given as 2%. What is to come? Is it a war of the worlds style scenario? GEO versus LEO MEO on competitive sides? Or is that a damp squib in our marketplace? Proliferation of small sat applications. 5G mobile connection direct to the satellite. Widespread cloud computing is almost here. IoT prevails, getting larger. Introduction of SDN, software-defined networks, a game changer affecting LEO MEO virtualization, allowing scalability, extendability, and a new breed of flexible satellite, and use for path selection decisions in GEO-LEO terrestrial domain. So financial headlines, as you've seen from that first slide coming out of SES, I mean, the market growth is 2.4 trillion. That's 10 to the power 12, guys, in 2021. And it's going to be 5.8 trillion in 2025. So that can be considered an explosion, an epoch, another epoch. Furthermore, currently it's noteworthy that Satcom is a mere 1%, and it's always been 1%. Whilst in 2025, I see that there's this wonderful growth, and I hope it happens. Is it a case of a eureka moment? Growth in Satcom at last? While looking at the addressable terminal market suppliers, the ground segment is about 2.9 billion, and that of Satcom providers is a whopping 124 billion. New unknown applications, new customers, matching supply with demand, And as we did discussed a short time ago, Chinese constellations. And I think you've got to be really careful of that one. The LEO MEO picture ahead for homogenized LEO MEO digitized world, it is somewhat early days. Their struggle is just starting, accepting success with O3b and Iridium. For LEO MEO, there is no doubting the big boys, the big time financing is available for a majority of players. However, long-term monetary success may elude a few, but that's another story to unfold. So if you found today interesting, the LEO MEO Constellation Digest offered a compelling contrast to our changing geospace segment story, both featuring impressive engineering. So my questions to each member of the audience: where does all the foregoing leave you as a believer? Singularly geo, singularly MEO, singularly LEO, or hybrid in relief? I think we've had some answers there. So more company mergers and acquisitions will continue to promote long-term prosperity and solidarity in the Satcom segment. And for predicted downstream Satcom epoch happening, in essence, it is well characterized by the Victorian author Charles Dickens. So I've borrowed a word from him entitled "It's Great Expectations" to summarize on behalf of the LEO MEO camp. Too early to say, perhaps, so stay tuned on that. So my final takeaway, and this is where I'm going to start wrapping up. Finally, our future is not cancelled because of COVID. Our innovative life with Satcom continues regardless. It did not get us all this time. So remain positive, we live on. So other items now, and this is a bit of an advertisement here. Hector has a new book, and it's not quite published yet. When is it going to be published, Hector? So anyway, high throughput.
End of this month in the US.
Yeah.
And end of next month, April, in the rest of the world, internationally.
Okay, now this book may well be of great interest to some of the audience. So please make contact directly with Hector. His email address is given at the end, excuse me, of his presentation. So my final word, we, Profen and I, are preparing additional virtual Satcom conferences concentrating upon supporting the latest GEO MEO LEO ground segment technological advances. We have a nominal dates of October the 21st, November the 25th, where one can learn more about VSAT and user terminals, and IoT, ML, cloud applications, respectively. So final message from Barry now to all CEOs, marketing people, BD, sales groups who may be interested about business in the country of Turkey. It possesses 80 million population of mainly younger average age group than most countries and has a growing high-tech economy. So I suggest it is a worthy market to court and support. So guys, everywhere, wherever you may be, till next time, and thank you for tuning in here. We hope you enjoyed it, and it's been valuable time spent.
Thanks very much, Barry.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.